So tell me, who are you? Where are you from? I know you originally a little bit from where you from, and then where you are now. How your life's changed. That'd be really interesting.
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Ranveer Singh. I currently live in Scotland, but I did live in Hayes, West London here for about 20 years. Originally I was born in Leeds. But yeah, so I lived here for most of kind of my upbringing. I got married here, had kids here. Started kind of this sort of work around that time as well. Obviously we know each other from before as well. Gatka, we used to learn together. Baba Fateh Singh Gatka Khara. And yeah, so kind of most of my upbringing was in Hayes, Southall.
Right.
So there's always been a kind of an influence in terms of Sikhi Prachar and Panthik issues, and always been involved in some sort of seva. But now we live in Scotland now. So most of my writing publication work has come out since actually I moved up. Badshay Mehma was started whilst I was here, but as it happened, it was published when I was up there. So that's me.
Oh, that's interesting. And then I guess there's also that restaurant as well.
We had the restaurant for a little while, yeah, we did. Yeah, we had Old School for a little while. The plan was always to move up with the family to Scotland. That was kind of always on our horizon. And then, in 2018, we just kind of took the decision to kind of, move up.
I'm guessing that peace and quiet helps a little bit when it comes to being a writer.
It does.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, Scotland is a completely different place to be. It's definitely a lot quieter. For me personally, from our experience, the air is cleaner, the water is better. People tend to have more time for you as well, so it's just generally kind of good vibes up there. So I work in Edinburgh, but I live in Motherwell. So I'm able to kind of manage the writing with my work as well and the kids. Speaking of, yes, Hanji. All right. Okay. I'll come and check in a bit. So yeah, I mean, it's a constant trying to manage, because you can't just do one thing. You've got to kind of manage the family life, your work life. You've got to find a balance. And because I've got a passion for writing, it kind of comes a bit naturally because I know it's something I enjoy doing. So I'll make time for this. I'll make time for doing the research and writing the plots and stuff or what have you, and then obviously taking care of the family at the same time. But yeah, Scotland's great for all of that. Yeah. The Highlands is like a 40-minute drive from us. So Loch Lomond starts, and then it's just beautiful. It's such a scenic and serene place, and it can be quite inspirational at times as well. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's not a case of it's not just about the location. You still have to be very organized to be able to pull off everything you're doing.
Yeah.
All these different spheres.
Yeah.
Tell me about the writing process. So is there a certain time of the week, perhaps?
It depends on the book that I'm writing. So depending on the genre. So for example, with these novels like Gulab Gaur, there's a lot more fluidity. Whereas with Badshay Mehma, which is a much bigger kind of comprehensive non-fiction work, I had to be a bit more kind of strict and disciplined on my timings. But most of my writing would take place in the evening. So after the kids have been put to bed, 7 p.m., 8 p.m. onwards, or early morning. So waking up early actually has its benefits other than your nitnem and amritavela, obviously. But trying to get ahead of yourself before the day starts, by which I mean before the kids wake up. So you've got to try and obviously work your time around their needs.
And so what was the process like with this? Was it literally just the early mornings?
Pretty much,
evening?
Yeah, exactly.
How long did it take?
So this one took a fair while actually. It took about 3 years in the making because I had to put it in the back burner for a little while. Other things came up in the meantime. I was also doing my master's, which I've just completed, so that took priority. But also, one of the reasons why I had to put it in the back burner was because of the lack of historical sources we have for her. So I had to speak to people in Punjab, and that took a bit of a process, a bit of a while. So yeah, in the end, it was about 3 years on a part-time basis.
Tell me about that process. So if there's books in Punjabi, and that's about it, right?
That's pretty much it in terms of books, on her, there's two,
So tell me about those books. Which books do you remember?
So there's one called Gulab Gaur Ghadar Di Thi by Kesar Singh. That was published in 2014.
Yeah, very recent.
Fairly recent, 10 years actually, and then there's also one by somebody called Rakesh Kumar that was published in 2019 or 2020, but they're the only two books that I found.
So it's very recent.
Relatively recent,
So it's great that the research has been done so quickly, and now we have this.
Yeah,
book,
that's right.
Within 10 years.
Yeah. So I actually reached out to Rakesh Kumar. I spoke with him because he was somebody who went to her pind in Sangrur. So he would have met the people who lived in the village. And the thing is, although there's not a huge amount online regarding her, in the bin you will have oral history, things that have been preserved through generations. So he had access to that. So yeah, his book was a good resource for me. Yeah.
And so okay, so you've done that kind of little bit of research. You've read the books. You've
Yeah.
spoken to him. How does that then become this? Like,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about plots.
Hanji.
And I guess there's that kind of, you've got ideas of how to creatively tell a story, I guess.
Yeah.
But then you because it's historically based.
Yeah.
You kind of have certain limitations too.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that how do you do that balancing act?
It's really difficult actually, trying to find the balance between what actually happened and then making it an enjoyable, engaging read as a novel. So, as I said, one of the issues I had was that there's just hardly anything written about her. So, a lot of the book obviously is based on true events, but I've had to weave in new characters to supplement her story. And also what it allowed me to do was kind of paint the wider picture of what the Ghadar movement was. So it's her story, but within the wider context of who the Ghadari Babbe were, what their inspiration was, what their aspirations were. So it allowed me to do that in a way that was that honored her story based on the information we have, but also tell the wider Ghadar movement and wider Sikh history before that as well. And then a bit of a nod towards what comes after her, obviously, that she would have been unaware of, but in a novel you have that artistic license to do that. So it was actually the perfect kind of mix, because otherwise the book would be probably maybe a fifth of the size based on just non-fiction work. So yeah, it was an interesting experiment, I guess, but I think I've done the best I can to honor her story whilst also honoring the story of the wider Ghadar movement.
And I suppose that generally when we talk about, so I guess two things here. One is, tell us a little bit about the Ghadar movement.
Yeah.
And also, generally, I suppose it's been framed as quite Indian independence.
Yeah.
And so, I guess Sikhs haven't really told our story around this necessarily very well. So, tell me a little bit about how you kind of framed it maybe differently, or did you, how did that kind of work for you?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. A lot of the times, the Ghadar movement and the Ghadari Babbe, they're depicted as Indian nationalists or secularists or communists even. But actually I have to give a lot of credit to Sardar Ajmer Singh. So his books have been a real inspiration for me. He's written a book called Ghadari Babbe Kaun San, in Gurmukhi Punjabi. He's also written a book on Shaheed by Kartar Singh Sarabha, which is a really good resource again. And also somebody called Sardar Rajwinder Singh Rahi. So those two have really, I think, changed the narrative and also changed the perception of who the Ghadari Babbe were. And what they've done is they've taken account of the original writings by some people like Baba Vasakha Singh, Baba Son Singh Pakana, who were the original founders of the Ghadar movement. So they've taken their first-hand written accounts and presented them, I think, in the best light possible, because for decades the Ghadar movement was presented as an Indian nationalist independence movement. And as I said, some people have also said they were communist and all sorts of accusations, but by relying on their own accounts, the founding members, you get a whole different picture. And I mean, Ajmer Singh says it best when he says, even if you look at their pictures, they're Gatre Paine, their Rehatman, Nitne Bhi Gursikhs, their inspiration clearly was Sikhi. And even like Baba Vasakha Singh writes this, he says that, a lot of people, they accuse me of being a communist, he's writing later on. And he says, but, where was the Russian Revolution in 1913 when we started this? My inspiration was Talbat Tapala, and I took lead from Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So he's very clear within their own writings, what the Ghadar movement was. And even if we look at numbers, again, through Ajmer Singh's work, you'll see that thousands of Sikhs, specifically Sikhs of Punjab, returned from America and Canada to liberate Punjab from clutches of colonial rule. Majority of the sacrifices that were made were also Sikhs as well. So it was very heavily led. But obviously, as with a lot of things post-47, the ruling power is able to, hijack the narrative, and you've got a number of books that have come out that show them as Indian nationalists and all these other kind of weird identities that are being imposed upon them. But when we look at their original writings, it's very clear that it was Sikhi was their inspiration. So I wanted to try and capture that within this as well, because the Punjabi novels that I refer to, they do a good job, but they're not really accessible. they're not relatable, I don't think, to today's generation. So I took a conscious decision to write it in English as well, and really capture the essence of what their inspiration was and how that was heavily a Sikh influence. But one thing that was really interesting with Gulab Kaur was there was no account that showed her as being an Amritdhari Gursikh. So I couldn't impose that obviously upon her. It's not clear cut even till this day. I think more research is needed on that. But it's clear that because she was inspired by the Ghadar movement and by the likes of Baba Wasakha Singh and so on and so on, there was clearly that Sikh element there. And she's often been referred to as like the Mike Bhago of the 20th century as well. So it's very clear that the inspirations were there, but I couldn't, so that's something I had to hold back on. So she's not obviously, in this novel, she's not an Amritdhari Gursikh, but she has that Sikh heritage, and that influence is clearly there within the actions that she's taking. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is, yeah.
So I suppose your audience is then, well, you tell me.
Yep.
Who is your audience, and what do you hope that they take away from this?
So the audience is primarily the Sikh diaspora, or the English. It's obviously written in English, so it's primarily for those who read and understand in English. In terms of, there isn't really an age cap, maybe kind of 9, 10 plus, similar to Rani Sada Kaur and Baba Deep Singh, just because of the terminology that's being used and the language that I've used within that. But yeah, mainly it's quite broad. I'd say it's the Sikh, the diaspora living outside of Punjab. It is available on Kindle in the India market, but the paperbacks are only available outside on Amazon and obviously Carly's House. So yeah, I'd say kind of today's generation, English-speaking, English-reading audience.
And what do you hope they take away from this after, once they've read it?
Yeah.
What do you hope that they kind of carry with themselves in the future?
There's a couple of things. I think the main thing is they get to understand the context of that world in terms of when the Ghadar movement was initiated. What led Gulab Kaur to travel from Punjab to the Philippines, hear these amazing inspirational speeches, and then decide to send her husband on, and she returns back to Punjab, not knowing what they were going to do. There wasn't really a plan. They just knew in their head that they had to free Punjab. So what was the driving force behind that? And then also, again, try to understand the Ghadar movement from the perspective of how it was heavily influenced by Sikh thought. And it wasn't necessarily, it's interesting because after the initial kind of wave between 1914 and 1918, after most of the Ghadars are kind of caught and they're executed, the Ghadar movement enters almost like a second phase where it does become a bit like diluted. And I think a lot of the narratives from the Indian state and Indian writers have focused on that time period. But I wanted to focus on what the original inspiration was. And there is reference to, like I said, Baba Wasakha Singh, Baba Sonsen Pakra. So if you are inspired by her story, do go ahead and read the other works that have been done by the likes of Ranveer Singh, because they provide a more non-fiction account of who the Ghadar movement was and what their aims were. So yeah, and there's also reference to 18th century Sikh at their hearts as well. Again, because it's a novel, I've got the artistic license to bring in characters who have got their own questions. So there's reference to great personalities from out their hearts within that as well. And I think that's an important part of Sikh storytelling. In Gurbani, Maharaj says, "Babaniya kahaniya pot sapot karan." We take inspiration from the great actions of those Gursikhs, right? So I think that has to be a part of the art of writing for a Sikh as well, to pay homage to them who came before us.
Amazing. And I guess for you, you've done, this isn't your first time you've picked a person from a history and you've dedicated an entire book to them.
Yeah.
How do you, we have so many people, even within the Ghadar movement.
Yeah.
What pulled you towards Gulab Kaur?
It's interesting because when I first saw that very, very famous picture of her where she's looking down at the camera, there was just something about her that kind of drew me towards her. And maybe it was something in her eyes, I don't know what it was, but I was instantly I've got to learn more about her. And then when I realized that there wasn't hardly anything out there, especially in English, and even the Punjabi novels that we have, they're not like an English novel, so maybe it's just my own kind of bias. I wasn't really connecting to them. So I knew there was a need to have something out there, and I kind of just took it upon myself to, based on obviously Rani Sada Kaur and Baba Deep Singh novels, to focus on. But you're right, there's so many other individuals that we can write stories on. there's our history is so rich. There's there's an abundance there.
And so while you were, so that's how it started off. But during your journey of writing this,
Yeah.
do you remember any moments where you were like, I feel like I'm getting something really personally from this. Like I'm almost transforming.
Yeah. I mean,
Give us an example.
yeah, there are examples. Yeah, even I mean, there are more examples, I guess, from Rani Sadakor and Baba Deep Singh because we have referenced them in that Puratan Granths. So, but with her, there was actually one particular moment where, because we have reference to some of the speeches she delivers from like the other books that have come out, and there's a really powerful speech that she delivers about the need for like the Bibia to step forward, and I can't remember the exact wording, but she says she stands up in Punjab and she's addressing a huge audience, and she says she really challenges them, both the men and the women, and I think that's important because in our Ittihas there's been equal importance given to both genders, right, male and female. So for somebody who's embodying that at the turn of the 20th century, where colonization has been sweeping across Punjab, all sorts of being done in terms of affecting Sikh psyche. So for someone to kind of really embody that and not only that, but then use it to inspire others was for me quite a powerful moment. And that's something, like I said, we have in our history. So it's not something that I made up. These are her words. So that was really powerful.
So as a writer, along the way, I suppose you've kind of seen the need that there's not many places to publish, there's not many publishing houses, if any. And you've kind of taken it on yourself to start publishing.
Yeah.
Well, publisher, Carly's House.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about that and how that happened.
So yeah, with Carly's House. So Carly's House was an idea we had back in 2020 because at the time I was just finishing up Bharat Mehma and I'd approached a couple of publishing houses, but because of the narrative of Bharat Mehma, it is so pro Gurmat, and it centers these decolonial Sikh texts, there was a bit of a pushback. And I know there are a couple of other Sikh publishing houses already out there, but I thought, well, there's no harm in having more. And this is something that I feel passionate about. I wanted to, inspire others to write and obviously help others on their publishing journey as well. So we kind of got together and we decided that we need to have our own publishing platform. So Carly's House was born primarily because of that. And the plan was that Bharat Mehma would come out later that year. So we announced Carly's House in June 2020. And when we announced it, we had a couple of people submit their own manuscripts. So actually, Bharat Mehma, I think, ended up being the 5th publication that came out. So we had 4 others that came out prior to that, one of which was Rani Sadakor as well. So that instantly showed me that there was clearly a need for it. And also, we have such a wealth of talented writers, I think, within the community, within the Panth, especially so outside of Punjab, where kind of within our remit. So over the years, I've worked with, I think we've published 25 books to date over the past 4 years, with writers, aspiring writers, established writers, poets based in Canada, America, the UK. So clearly we were correct in thinking there was a need for it, but it's allowed me to kind of, engage with them. And within that, we've also held like writing contests because we want to try and promote like Sikh writing. And within that, you have control of the narrative. That narrative is hugely important. Like we know from our own political scenarios and issues that we've faced over the past few decades, how important narrative is. When you allow others to write your history, obviously they're in full control. So with this, it's such a powerful way. It's a form. I wouldn't say it's out and out prachar, because I think prachar within the Sikh setting is a specific type of, dissemination of information, but it's a form of that because it gives you that control. We can edit the manuscripts, whether it's a small children's book or whether it's a large, non-fiction piece of work, you have complete oversight over that. And with that, you also have then quality control in terms of printing. We've recently acquired printing presses as well, with the help of a fundraising campaign we did. So yeah, things are growing. And the main thing is to have control of the narrative and put out work that that is empowering and makes us feel unapologetically Sikh. We're proud to be Sikh in the sense of this is our story. We're going to tell it on our terms. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, no, really, and I can see how that all connects with the story because, I remember going to Stockton Gurdwara and seeing their print.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I suppose even Gulab, or as the references even on the online articles about her carrying a printing press. As a fake journalist.
Sure.
So it's all there, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Repeating
Yeah.
maybe now. What inspiration would you give to other writers?
I mean, if you like, I had no prior like experience of writing other than articles here and there. If you're thinking about writing, if you've got like a story in mind, no matter what stage you're at, just go with it. Like, and if there's anyone listening or watching who perhaps needs some guidance, even out with publishing with Carlos House, I'm happy to always give that advice wherever I can, however helpful it might be. But there is such a need to have, I think, more books produced, especially about like Sikh history. And as you said earlier, there are so many other individual characters that hardly get mentioned in our Itihas. It's usually we have like samargams for the well-known ones, which is obviously and rightly so, but there are so many others that deserve that recognition as well. So if you are writing, then, or if you are a writer, or if you're thinking of writing something, then just go with it. Just go with it. Do an ardas and just put your all into it. Yeah.
And I suppose we've seen that, with this library, Professor Gurmukh Singh Library here at Guru Nanak Road in Southall. At first, it felt like, how are we going to fill this space?
Right. Okay.
Just to Sikh books.
Yeah.
But once you start, you do realise there's actually quite a lot.
There is. Yeah.
It's growing every week.
Growing.
I feel like there's another book.
Even the library at Glasgow Central Singh Sabha Gurdwara, which is where we go. We do have a lot of good resources, and I think that's one thing I like about this initiative is you're making it welcoming for children to come in, and I guess other young readers of all ages, and we have to create these spaces for them to come in to have that connection with our history. Otherwise, what happens is, like, a lot of Gurudwaras have great libraries, some amazing books in there, but I don't think we're utilizing them as much as we ought to be doing. So having it bespoke and custom made for children to come in, making sure it's inviting enough, colours and all the rest of it is a great thing. So when I actually saw this being announced, I was like over the moon. I said, this is brilliant. We need more of these, I guess, across the country. Yeah.
I think it's a process. First you get the writers, then you get the publishers. And then you realise, we need to put this book somewhere. Then you get the libraries, I guess.
Yeah. That's definitely.
Just last question, I suppose, is what you're up to? What's if you want to share anything about any future projects you're working on?
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Yeah, so I am kind of working on another book idea. I don't know whether it's going to be another novel or whether it's going to be a non-fiction piece of work. The working title is like Baghdad and Beyond, and it's based on the idea so Guru Nanak Padshah goes on their Udasis and they travel in all four directions, and I've always had this question of why doesn't Guru Sahib go further west beyond Baghdad? I know there are a number of conflicting reports online saying they went as far as Australia and America and all the rest of it. Nothing's been verified. So we know they go as far as Baghdad as per Bhai Gurdas Ji's Vara and the Janam Sakya. So it's more of a kind of an internal kind of question that I've had, and it's also been kind of become more pressing since I've studied my MA in philosophy, because I've had the opportunity to study Western philosophies and all these so-called great thinkers we come to learn about growing up in the West. So we know what's happening in Greece, we know what's happening in Rome, we know what was happening in Europe at the time. So why does Guru Sahib not go beyond Baghdad and have discussions with them as he did with others? So that's kind of still in the planning stages. I don't know whether it's going to be a non-fiction work. If it is, then it's going to be probably a lot longer. Or I did write a plot out for a novel, which I won't obviously share here, but that's something I'm kind of working with and tinkering with in the background. Yeah.
I guess just to finish, where can we get this book, and why should we read it, I guess?
Yeah, sure. So Gulab Kaur, it's available to purchase on carlishouse.com. It's also available across the Amazon markets, amazon.ca, .com.au, and as I said earlier, it's also available on the Kindle version as well. And why you should purchase, these are stories I think we should be reading about so we can preserve them and also pass them on to the next generation. I think we have a great responsibility on that front, especially for us living in the West, where we live in relative comfort. There isn't any kind of pressing concerns that affect our day-to-day as Sikhs, I'm saying. So using this time to really preserve that history, make sure it gets passed on to the next generation, and also it's a great story as well. This is something, like I said, recently married, goes to the Philippines, hears about these speeches, great speeches from those who are returning to liberate Punjab. It's quite a romantic novel in that sense as well. And then, obviously her story in terms of what she goes through, that's something we should be aware. We should know our history. I think a lot of the times we concentrate on like the 18th century at the house, like the great shaheeds we've had, and everyone kind of seems to know about that. And then you'll jump to maybe that the Singh Sabha, Babur Akalis, maybe then the 84. And I think this period sometimes gets missed out. So you've got a novel now to read about it. So yeah, do engage with it. And obviously, if there's something that you've enjoyed, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Any feedback, constructive or otherwise, is hugely appreciated as well.